Hey guys, so we just had YCS Bologna recently, and so as usual, I wanted to provide a tier list of the best rogue decks using Dueling Book data as well as YCS and regional topping information. I also just want to point out that I've been sick the last couple of days, so my voice is going to sound a little bit weird. And as usual, definitely go check out all my discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles as well as sleeves and other supplies. You can find all of that in the video description. Okay, so this is what the overall meta tier list by the data looked like when I did it over a week ago. Now this, at the time it was done, was based only on regional level information post Valiant Smashers, so it didn't have the YCS level information at that point. So anyways, for the purpose of this video, we're only going to look at the decks that are in Rogue and Other, but for now, let's just say, let's just put Sprite, Keshtir, and Vanquish Soul, put them as tier 2 for now, because after that YCS, they did have some tops there as well. Now, in terms of Mekonko, as I always say, unfortunately, YGScope cannot identify any Dueling Book data for this deck, so we cannot include that. And as for Fire Kings, which is now also new and was not included in the overall meta tier list because the structure deck was not out at the time I did the video, but unfortunately, this deck will also not be included, just because I think Fire King is actually more of a tier 2 deck, considering its pretty decent YCS success recently. Alright, so let's just start with the best rogue decks for this month, and we are actually starting with Rikka Sun Avalon. Of course, it topped YCS Bologna. I mean, I guess it's not a European event unless Rikka tops, but you know, it is a very good deck as long as, you know, you're able to pilot it very well, because it does have some pretty tricky lines, but nonetheless, I mean, like, on one hand, you know, you are seeing a lot of Nibiru and Droll still, as you would have seen in that YCS Hot Cup breakdown video I just posted yesterday, so that definitely hampers Rikka, but you know what, it still has like a unique ability as well, right, in terms of, like, let's say Con, that field spell is pretty nuts, just being able to like tribute your opponent's monsters as like plants, and kind of bypasses a lot of different like, let's say, negates or whatever, and also going first post side if they do like the Rose Whip theory and Regulus lock, like that's pretty much GG for most other decks. So next we have Marincess, which of course scored very high this time around because it did top YCS Bologna. I mean, the deck actually does have some random tops here and there throughout this year actually, so there's always been potential for this deck. Regional wise, only one regional top 8 that we're aware of, but nonetheless, it's a deck that's fairly strong. It's, let's say, for example, like the trap to be able to activate from hand, and not only is it an imperm, but also protects your own monsters as well, as like a spell trap negate as well, and it's a deck that can play a lot of hand traps, which is kind of nice actually, because as again, if you saw my YCS Hot Cup breakdown, there's a lot of hand traps being played right now. It is a pretty hand trap heavy format, and this deck can certainly do that very, very well. Then we have Fluandereeze, which of course actually kind of fell off in terms of YCS success, but regional wise it's actually been doing pretty well. Actually, just in the recent Niagara regionals that I was at, Hugh, who goes to like my locals, he actually finished second place, so add to another regional top for Flunder. So can be very, very good as long as tier limits like tier 1, you know, Shifter can go very, very strong, and this deck, like something like Featherstorm, just like super, super sacky, and it can certainly go off and take a lot of wins. And then we have Swordsoul. So post Age of Overlord, it actually did have a couple YCS tops, but post Valiant Smashers since then, no YCS success, but you know what, regional wise, still several tops though. Definitely cannot sleep on this deck. It's like as solid as it comes. I mean, as a synchro strategy, there's definitely more popular options like Vanadium and now even Centurion, but Swordsoul, especially being much more budget friendly as well, can be a really good one to start out with. Then moving on to the B tier, we do have good old Heroes. It actually has a couple regional top 8 so far, post Valiant Smashes as well, and it's always like a very popular deck online as well. So my good friend Miguel actually finished 9th place in Niagara Regional, so he was also very, very close to adding another top for Heroes. But nonetheless, I mean, if you can pilot it very well, and I'm sure if people are playing Hero now, it's because that's all they ever play, and I'm sure they're piloting it pretty well, but it can be pretty good. I mean, Dark Angel is not really good as it used to be, I don't think, especially with like pretty much every deck also having a very good generic link to in SP Little Knight, and that just kind of helps with that. But you know what, like DP, Pop, I guess Dark Law, Banish is always really nice as well. And then we also have Tr-Brigade. So this is interesting because I believe like the Fire King, the new Fire King structure deck can also go hand in hand with Tr-Brigade, and I'm sure Tr-Brigade Sprite still exists as well as a pretty solid rogue option. I mean, Tr-Brigade always seems to be like a pretty popular deck. Anytime I have a Tr-Brigade deck profile on my channel, it always does really well. So people really, really love this strategy. I mean, it is unfortunately a little bit, has always been, even in its tier 1 days, kind of been weak to something like Imperm Veiler, right? Just because of it trying to banish the monsters in grave to try to summon their link monsters. So Imperm Veiler, even Ghost Mourner, like those are pretty popular right now, especially because of like Turbulence set 4. So in that respect, maybe not the best, but who knows, maybe it doesn't, they can play around it better now. I haven't really seen much of Tr-Brigade lately myself. And then we have Virtual World. I'm not sure what's really changed for this deck in the last little while. I mean, someone tell me if you know, because it actually has a few regional top 8s as well. So this is deck that's certainly fallen off for quite a bit. I mean, I don't even know what they really set up anymore, because after the VFD ban, I know they had stuff like, you know, like Kaliga and like Crystal Wing and like the Chuche Pop. I don't know if that's still what they go with. I mean, one of the downsides with Virtual World was that it's quite bricky deck, because you need like multiple names to really go off, but nonetheless, I think it is kind of cool to see them resurge again. And then we have Dark World, which still has that one regional top post Valiant Smashers. No YCS success. I don't think this deck has actually topped the YCS since the structure decks came out basically a year ago, I think. But you know what, regional wise, you're still probably going to see it here and there. It's definitely not the best deck to go against. You know, if you have Droller or Shifter, you're fine. If not, you're probably getting your entire hand looped and just getting FTK'd. So next we have Math Mech. So, you know, it's not really that long ago, where it was only like earlier this year where this deck kind of came back as a tier 1 contender again. But since like the circular limit definitely kind of fell off, and of course we still have Bis shows around as well, and even DD Crow seeing a good amount of play, and just anything that interrupts that super factorial can be pretty devastating. But Math Mech, it is a pretty consistent strategy, and on top of that, similar to like, you know, Marince's, like it can fit a lot of hand traps as well, which can be really good in terms of flexibility. So next we have Dinosaurs, and similar to Hero, this is a deck that's always made like the rogue tier list just because of how popular it is. And you know what, it has a couple of regional top 8s as well, kind of like Hero as well. So I'm glad to see that it's still having some form of competitive success. I'm going to assume most of those tops probably end up being more like a going first combo Dinosaur now, and not like the going second, blind second, like OTK kind of dinos that we saw back in its tier 1 days a few years ago actually. Moving on to the C tier, we do have Salamangreat. Unfortunately, post Valiant Smashers, it does not have any YCS tops or regional tops. I know it did have it, I think, after Age of Overlord, or it definitely had some success at least. You know, it is the year of fire. Like we had, you know, Salamangreat support, we had, you know, Rescue Ace, like I guess Fire Kings, and even Infernoble Knight. But unfortunately, right now Salamangreat kind of struggling. Although it is a deck that's usually played quite a bit online, but win percentage wise, 46%, that is pretty low. But I guess, I mean, it is at least pretty flexible. It can play a lot of hand traps. It also has like a rank 4 toolbox as well as capability to OTK. So I think as a rogue option, it's got like pretty much everything you could ask for, but perhaps, you know, not seeing as much success lately. Next we have Pendulum Magician. This one I'm actually really excited about. It does also have a couple regional top as well. This is a deck when I first started playing competitively. It's one of the decks that I started out with. I really liked it, although I wasn't very good with the deck. And at the time, this was back in 2019, this was kind of considered like maybe like fringe tier 2 deck at the time. One of the weaknesses of Pendulum Magician at that point was that it really did not have much non-engine space, like barely could really not fit any hand traps really. Nowadays I'm seeing these topping deck lists, and they do have actually a pretty decent amount of flex spots. I guess the deck has kind of evolved a little bit better where it doesn't need as much in-engine space. I think one of the downsides of it, I think it is still pretty prone to like something like Droll or Nibiru. I remember when I first started Pendulum Magician, you know, after a few months of playing, Nibiru, Dark Ruler, and Shifter all came out in that Mega Tin, and it really made it hard to play Pendulums. But hopefully they found a way to evolve and continue to like adapt and kind of play around those hand traps better. I really do want to start playing Pendulum Magician again someday. Next we have Tr-Brigade. This is a pretty popular rogue deck, although it certainly has fallen off since like earlier this year when this first came out. This was actually at one point like second most played deck on Dueling Book, but definitely fallen off. It does have like a regional top, so I think regional level wise you are probably going to still see some success here and there. YCS level, it never really had that many YCS tops even when it was popular. Actually, I know it did have some though. But nonetheless, you know, it's a deck that budget-wise, very good, really good deck to start out with. I think one of its main weaknesses has always been like it's just kind of hard to go with this deck going second. But I do know that they can play like, let's say, Shifter in the side, or maybe they even main it. So at least that's something if you're playing against something like, you know, Tier Limits. Next we have Dogmatica. This is a deck that's definitely, it did get some support earlier this year, but you know, one regional top, not bad. I mean, it's definitely not really the most popular deck. It is kind of cool though. It's basically like a very anti-meta strategy heavy, and it actually like rips the extra deck better than Cashier can now, I guess, with like Mindhacker being banned. So I think it's pretty cool. Definitely not, we're gone from the days of like Dogmatica Invoke. I know there were some Dogmatic Invoke being played on Dueling Book at least still, but more or less this is probably more like pure Dogmatica. And then we have Sky Striker. Unfortunately, this deck just has not been doing well lately at all. I think it's just, even with that engage coming back, maybe they even put it back to 3 now that it's just not doing that well. And also, I think there's more Sky Striker support coming out in the pipeline. But no regional tops, no YCS tops, and win percentage wise online, like 39% is just very, very abysmal. So it usually sees a good amount of play online though. Like, it's a pretty fan favorite deck. But nonetheless, I think right now this deck is really, really struggling. I'm not sure if like Runic Sky Striker version is also like a better way to play it. I know that kind of popped up here and there earlier this year as well, but curious to hear what you think if you play Sky Striker. Next we have Punk. So this is another deck that's definitely fallen off, I guess. In terms of synchro strategies, you've had more popular options like Vanadium and now also Centurion. So regional, there was a regional top. I think it was pure Punk, I'm not really sure. I know, like, for example, I recently provided like a Punk Horus deck profile with my friend Tristan, so you can certainly go check that out as well. I think there's some synergies there, and with like Horus stuff, I think it's really, really cool. But again, just under 40% win percentage, like really, really struggling at this point. So next we have Drytron, which does have a regional top. Unfortunately, I do suspect, with a lot of Droll being played right now, and also Bestials and even DD Crow, like, it's not going to be very good for Drytron. They need their names in their graveyard to summon back, or even like their ritual spell in the grave. If that gets DD Crow, that's kind of critical as well. Although, if left uninterrupted, they are pretty scary going first, just because of how they can basically do like a turn skip, and even if they don't do that, they probably have something like Chaos Max or Vanity's Ruler or whatever, and just kind of lock you up from playing. So it is a deck that I definitely do get scared when I go against it and I lose the die roll. So next we have Exosister. This actually did have a YCS top post Age of Overlord, but post Valorant Smashes unfortunately has not had any top so far. I mean, we were only a few weeks into it, of course, regional level wise as well. But it's a deck that can main deck shifter, like against something like, as long as tier limits. Again, if it's like tier 1, I think there is still room for Exosister to have a chance at doing well in the events. But right now, not doing too hot. And finally, moving into final tier, we do have Dinomorphia, another deck that actually had some regional success last time around, like a month or two ago. This time, post Valiant Smashers, no tops yet. I'm sure we'll see some kind of regional top. I mean, it's even out a YCS top, I believe, just not that long ago, post Age of Overlord as well. It's a really interesting deck. I mean, 56% win percentage on Dueling Book as well is pretty high. I mean, maybe some players are just rage quitting because of, they basically can't out like their boss monster, which kind of serves as like a constant mystic mine. So very often you're going to lose to Dinomorphia when they had something like, like 13 life points or whatever. Can be very frustrating. So finally, we do have Eldritch, which of course definitely is a deck that's really fallen off, even from a rogue standpoint, which is kind of sad to see, because it was definitely, like at the beginning of the pandemic, for example, it was like by far like a tier 1 strategy, right? So it's certainly fallen off, but there are different ways to play it, whether with like branded or maybe even tier limits, or maybe with like the new Horus stuff, just being any kind of like rave oriented packages, or just pure with like, just a bunch of floodgates. But of course you have like Labyrinth, which is just a much better trap version of the deck. But I think there's a lot of Eldritch lovers out there, and unfortunately, I think it actually did have like a YCS top earlier in the year, so I think like there's still some potential to at least have some kind of at least like regional level success, but definitely not very consistent. And another deck that I wanted to highlight that was not included in this tier list is Phantom Knights, because they actually have a couple of regional tops so far, post Valiant Smashers, being played with like the Horus and Adventure stuff in conjunction. So I think it is a pretty solid deck. Unfortunately, it did not seem to have that much play online at all, and so it didn't make it, but definitely wanted to highlight it still. Alright guys, so that was it for the Rogue tier list by the data for this month. Hopefully you found that interesting. We're still waiting on that ban list, but you know what, for the most part, Rogue decks are typically safe from the ban list anyways. But big thanks to all of you for watching, and huge thanks to my patrons for the continued support, and well, take care guys.